previous lessons we learned about different IDEs and how to set up them. So in this lesson let's talk about more programming. So as in the previous example we printed Python inside of the parentheses. So let's run this code using Ctrl plus Enter, and now you can see we have Python on the console. So we discussed that print is equivalent to a verb in English grammar, which is called a function, and every function in Python has parentheses. So as you can see, we wrote print and then we pass parentheses. So in this IDE or the code editor, if you just pass a opening bracket, it will automatically add the closing bracket, so you don't need to add them both. So that's convenience when using IDEs or smart IDEs. And then we pass the Python that is called a string. So now you are introduced to a new term called string. So what are strings? Well, let's say we pass print and then we pass Python without any strings because we want this Python printed on the terminal. But as you can see, we have some red underlines going on under this Python word. So let's run the file to see what happens. As you can see, we get some error. So this is the first or the foremost error you have occurred. So don't freak out looking at that because it's in pink, it's not in red. So let's decipher the error we have received. So you can see we have traceback, most recent call last, that we have called this function, and then we have file main py. So we have our file main py, and then we have line 2. So you can see line 2, and then in module. So as a side reference, a Python file is also called a module. So just keep that in mind for now, and then you can see the location of the code where the error occurred, and this is the code itself. And now it is telling us that name error. What? That name Python is not defined. So what it does mean by that Python is not defined. So how can we define that if we even want? So Python in here without quotes is treated as a variable, and a variable is simply a box or a store where you can store data types. So what are data types, variables, and all these terms I'm using? So let's look at them one at a time. First of all, let's see, and as also a side note for you, let's clear the error. And if you want to create some comments, let's say I want something like this is my first tutorial LEDs, and you can see we added a hash prefixing this line. So you can say that this can cause error, but if we're in the program, you see we get no error, because when a line is prefixed with this hash, it is ignored by the Python interpreter. That is, when the code is executed, you can say this line is deleted from the file. But we keep these to tell ourselves or notify something to increase the readability in here. So let's say we have some data types. So let's get to that topic of data types. So as you know, inside English we have some things called alphabets, that is A, B, C, which we use to create words, and we use those words to create sentences, and we use those sentences in return to create paragraphs. So let's create that into a hierarchy. So we have alphabets, that is A, B, or C, that concludes words, that creates sentences, that in turn creates paragraphs. So what is the structure of Python programming language in these terms? So we have data types, and we can create those data types into codes. We can create those codes into program, and we can create a application with those programs. So as you can see, this is the English language reference, and this is Python language reference, where we use data types that can be said as alphabets of the programming language or Python programming language. Then we create codes with those data types, and then we create a program with those codes, and then we create a whole application with those programs. So we are at this starting point now here until we create an application there. So we will actually create some cool applications. So let's for now start with data types, that is the ABCs of Python. So data types can be created on many types: to create some text values, to create some numerical values, to create some decimal point values, or even complex numbers. So if you want to create text values, we need to use string. So strings are notified with str in Python, that is called string. So a string can be created with quotes, as we created the Python in the example, either single quotes or double quotes. So you can use any, let's use single quotes here. So we can create any text data and store it as here. So let's turn on the code intelligence for now, because we don't want those lines there. So now you can see we have Python here. So a string can contain any numerical value, or even alphabetical value, numerical value, and anything, special symbols. So we will get into more in the strings in later videos. For now, you just need to learn that to store text data, you can create string which are created with either single or double quotes. As you can see, I create a single starting quote, a ending quote is added automatically. So keep that on mind also, the benefits of IDE. And then if you want to create numeric data, we have integers. If you're familiar with maths a lot, then you will be familiar with integer also. Integers are basically numbers. It can be any number, -1 to infinity or -infinity to infinity for more specifically. So here is the same. We can create any number, let's say 12, 13, 14, or even 100. But the only thing is that it cannot contain a decimal point. It can be integer only if it's a number without decimal point. So the next question comes to create, how can we then create decimal points? For that, we need to create floats that are also called floating point numbers in programming notations, that are simply decimal point numbers, like anything 3.45. So you can take this as a float and this as an integer. So bear that in mind, that integers are non-decimal point numbers and floats are decimal point numbers. That's the only difference. Both are numbers. So let's move on to the next numeric type, that is called complex, that Python has to offer as a data type. So we can create a complex number like 4 plus 5j. In here, j is an imaginary part. You may have done some algebra in your schools where we have a x value that is unknown and we find that using mathematics. So it's like that here, that is an imaginary part. We don't know the value of j in here. So the only condition is here that you cannot x, y, or any other notation. You can use j as a notation to create a complex number. So let's move on ahead to create sequence data types that are called sequence. Sequence is a term of 1 element, 2 element, 3 element, 4 element. Like let's say we create a list. We all know what is list. A list is just a list of anything. It can be your list of shoppings and it can be list of numbers. So we can create lists in Python using square brackets. We can pass any numbers. We can create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have created a list with numbers from 1 to 5. So they are as easy as you can see to create using square brackets. We can add many values in them. It can be homogeneous or heterogeneous too. That is, it can store numbers as well as text data too, like our Python here. So our list can contain any type of data types. So you can say a list is a container of all the different data types. So let's move on to the next sequence data type, tuple. A tuple is similar to a list, but it is created with round brackets instead, or you can say parentheses, but they also come with some differences. Like let's say you want to change these values of the list. so you can change them, but tuples element cannot be changed. So once you have created a tuple, you're gonna change them, and we will get to them later. So just keep that in mind that this can be created with square brackets, tuples can be created with parentheses. So if you're more interested, you can just carry on and check them later. So they are both same, but the only difference in them is that these elements, list elements, can be changed, but tuple elements cannot be changed. So next we have sets. So also a mathematical notation. If you know, a set is just a collection of numbers or anything. It could be words or even decimal point numbers. So sets in Python can be created with curly brackets, and you can just store any number in it. But it has also its features because it's a different data type. Its feature is that you cannot store equal or similar data types or data in this set. So let's say we have a list and we create a list with 1 1 1 2 1 2 and 1 2. So we have 3 pairs of 1 and 2 here. But if we want to create that into a set, we cannot create that because sets do not contain similar values. So that's why they are different entities. So if you are involving creating a list or a sequence data where you don't have similar data types, so always use set. So we'll also further explore that more, so let's leave that to be for now. And then comes booleans. We always occur questions where we have to say yes or no. In programming languages we have true or false values, that is called booleans or bools for short. These values can be used to, as they denote, to say yes or to say no, as we say in our language. So these are the different data types you need to know for now. We will explore more data types and even create these all, and we need more properties, learn about these operations more and more as we go further. For now, this was an introduction to all the data types or the ABCs in programming or Python programming language. So let's say we used a print function in the previous example. So this can be also said to be a building block or alphabets in programming languages, but they are more usually actions that involves these data types inside of them. So we cannot perform function just with the function, so we need something to print on. That's why we need a data type to print on the terminal, else this print function is just none. So you can say if we run the program, let's remove these for now or it will create error. So let's run the program. You can see we get nothing. So print function at least needs a data type to print on. So that's a function in Python, and as I mentioned earlier, every function is followed by parentheses. So that's it for functions. Next comes keywords. So keywords are also building blocks in Python, like we have some prepositions or word joiners in language, in our English language, like in or for or here, behind, something like those. So Python also have those keywords that are used to build sentences or blocks, and we use them to create some programs or codes. So I have created them because there are a lot of them. So in Python there are total 33 keywords. All of them are used to create some sentences, and as we code, as we will proceed more, we will use these keywords to build our codes, to in return build programs. So for now you can just watch over them, these keywords, and learn the different type of data types. So that's it for this lesson. We learned about different data types or the building blocks of codes in Python language. So in the next lesson we'll learn about more the term string, and we occurred the error. I will show you here that the Python name is not defined. So it was telling that Python is a variable name without any value. So as I told you before, you can see if I just type in Python, that is a single entity, or you can say a word without any quotations mark or anything is created as a variable. So in the next lesson we'll get to that. So see you there.